Question 1. For each statement below, indicate whether the answer is true or false. Windows 11 supports 3-column snap layouts only if the screen resolution is wide enough. The correct answer is true. Wi-Fi direct printing requires a device with Bluetooth support. The correct answer is false. Miracast requires a WDDM-compatible display adapter and Wi-Fi direct adapter. The correct answer is true. 16-bit applications are fully supported on 64-bit editions of Windows. The correct answer is false. Now let's move into the explanation so you can understand why each answer is correct. First, the 3-column snap layout in Windows 11 truly depends on having at least 1,1020 effective pixels of width, so a higher resolution monitor naturally enables this feature more comfortably. Consequently, the statement is true. Next, Wi-Fi direct printing does not rely on Bluetooth at all. Instead, it requires Wi-Fi direct capability, which allows devices to communicate without needing a router, so the claim about Bluetooth is false. Furthermore, Miracast does depend on both a WDDM-compatible display adapter and Wi-Fi direct support, because it mirrors displays wirelessly using those underlying technologies, making the statement true. Finally, 64-bit versions of Windows no longer run 16-bit applications natively. Older software requires virtualization or compatibility tools, so the last statement is false. Question 2. For each statement below, indicate whether it is true or false. Microsoft Identity Manager can bridge multiple on-prem directories with Microsoft Entra ID. The correct answer is true. Microsoft Entra ID P1 includes Microsoft Entra Connect Health for operational insight. The correct answer is true. Microsoft Entra ID Basic includes access to self-service password reset with write-back. The correct answer is false. Microsoft Entra Domain Services supports nested organizational units. The correct answer is false. Now I'm going to walk you through the explanations so you understand why each option is correct. To begin with, Microsoft Identity Manager truly integrates with Microsoft Entra ID to synchronize and manage identities across various on-premises systems, such as LDAP, Oracle, and Active Directory, so that first statement is accurate. Additionally, Entra ID P1 does include Connect Health, which gives administrators performance and usage data to help monitor hybrid identity environments, making the second statement true as well. However, self-service password reset with write-back is not included in the basic tier. Instead, it requires premium capabilities, so that statement is false. Finally, Microsoft Entra Domain Services only supports a flat organizational unit structure rather than nested OUs, which means the last statement is false. Question 3. Fill in the blanks by selecting the correct options from the drop-down menus. The free tier of Microsoft Entra ID is automatically included with Azure or M365 subscriptions and does not include premium features such as conditional access or identity protection. Now let me guide you through the explanation so everything makes sense. First, the free tier is automatically included because every Azure or Microsoft 365 subscription receives this tier by default without any manual setup, which is why the first blank is accurate. Furthermore, the free tier does not include premium features since capabilities like conditional access or identity protection require a P1 or P2 license. So the second blank correctly reflects that limitation. Question 4. Which two capabilities are only available in Microsoft Entra P1 or P2 and not in the free edition? Select two answers. A. Assigning applications to users and groups. B. Dynamic group membership. C. Self-service group management. D. Delegating app permissions to users. The correct answers are B and C. Now let me explain why these two are correct so everything becomes clear. First, dynamic group membership is part of Microsoft Entra P1, meaning it relies on advanced automation that the free edition does not support, and therefore option B is a premium feature. Additionally, self-service group management belongs to Microsoft Entra P2, which introduces higher-tier identity capabilities unavailable in the free edition, making option C correct as well. Meanwhile, assigning applications to users and groups is already supported in the free tiers, so it cannot be one of the premium-only capabilities. Finally, delegating app permissions is a basic function available in every edition, which confirms that the only two capabilities restricted to P1 or P2 are dynamic group membership and self-service group management. Question 5. For each enterprise desktop lifecycle phase, drag it to the appropriate boxes in the correct match column to match it against its function. Each item may be used once, more than once, or not at all, replacing outdated hardware or unenrolling old devices. The correct match is upgrade and retire, teaching users how to use systems and providing help when needed. The correct match is support, preparing a system management strategy. The correct match is planning, acquiring devices and handling payment processes. The correct match is purchasing, installing the OS, enrolling and configuring devices. The correct match is deployment, keeping systems functional and secure. The correct match is operations. Now let me explain these matches so the entire desktop lifecycle becomes easy to understand. First, replacing outdated or unenrolled devices belongs to upgrade and retire because this phase handles decommissioning and refreshing hardware that is no longer useful. Additionally, teaching users how to use systems is part of support, since it focuses on training and helping users stay productive. Furthermore, preparing a management strategy fits the planning phase because it sets the direction for how devices will be handled throughout their lifetime. Meanwhile, acquiring devices and processing payments align with purchasing, as it includes requisitions and approvals. Moreover, installing the operating system and configuring devices fall under deployment because this phase covers setup, enrollment, and application installation. Finally, keeping systems functional and secure is part of operations, since it ensures all deployed devices remain efficient and protected over time. Question 6. Match each type of Microsoft Entra user to its correct definition. Each item may be used once, more than once, or not at all. Account created and managed within the tenant. The correct match is member user. Account typically created when sharing with external users. The correct match is guest user. Account sourced from another Microsoft Entra tenant. The correct match is guest user. Account created using a Microsoft account like Outlook.com. The correct match is guest user. Now let me explain these matches clearly so you understand how each user type fits its definition. First, an account created and managed within the tenant is considered a member user because it represents internal staff whose identities are fully controlled by the organization. Additionally, accounts created during external sharing scenarios, such as accessing shared documents, are guest users since they originate outside the tenant. Furthermore, when an account comes from another Microsoft Entra tenant, it is still treated as a guest user because it is external to the local directory, even though it is Microsoft-based. Finally, accounts created using services like Outlook.com are also guest users because they originate from personal Microsoft accounts rather than the organization's tenant. Question 7. Arrange the steps to create a new user in Microsoft Entra ID using the Azure portal in the correct order. Instruction. Drag and drop the items into the correct order, starting with the first step at the top. Step 1. Select Microsoft Entra ID in the Azure portal. Step 2. Navigate to All Users. Step 3. Click Plus New User. Step 4. Enter user details such as name, username, properties, and roles. Step 5. Select Create to finalize the user. Now let me explain these steps so you clearly understand how the process flows from start to finish. First, you begin by selecting Microsoft Entra ID in the Azure portal because this is where identity and user management begins within the platform. Additionally, navigating to All Users is the next logical step, as it takes you directly to the location where new accounts can be created and managed. Furthermore, clicking Plus New User initiates the account creation process, allowing the admin to start defining the user's identity. After that, entering details such as username, properties, and roles ensures the user is properly set up with the correct information. Finally, selecting Create completes the entire process and finalizes the new user account in the tenant. Question 8. Your organization already has a fleet of Windows 10 laptops in use. You need to bring these existing devices under centralized management without reinstalling or reimagining the operating system, and you want organizational policies and required applications to be applied automatically during enrollment. Which approach should you use? Select one answer. A. Use traditional reimagining and PXE boot. B. Configure autopilot reset before enrolling. C. Use Windows Autopilot enrollment. D. Require devices to ship directly from vendor. The correct answer is C. Now let me explain why this is the right approach for enrolling existing devices without redeploying the operating system. First, Windows Autopilot enrollment is designed specifically to bring already deployed devices under management without reinstalling Windows, which makes it ideal for organizations transitioning existing fleets. Additionally, Autopilot applies required policies and applications during enrollment, ensuring consistent configuration across all devices. However, traditional reimagining and PXE boot are legacy methods that require full OS redeployment, making them unnecessary for this scenario. Furthermore, Autopilot reset is used for refreshing devices that are already managed, not for initial enrollment. Finally, requiring devices to ship directly from the vendor is optional, but not a requirement for Autopilot, so it does not apply in this context. Question 9. Which two steps are part of the building phase in the desktop deployment lifecycle? Select two answers. A. Performing a network-wide deployment. B. Streamlining the deployment process. C. Testing standardized images. D. Managing user training and support. The correct answers are B. Streamlining the deployment process, and C. Testing standardized images. Now, let me explain why these two steps belong in the building phase. First, streamlining the deployment process is essential during the building phase, because this is when you design and refine a scalable, repeatable method for deploying devices effectively. Additionally, testing standardized images also belongs here, since testing helps identify issues before devices are deployed at scale. However, performing a network-wide deployment happens later during the actual deployment phase, not during building. Finally, managing user training and support occurs after deployment in the support phase, which is why it is not part of the building stage. Question 10. Match each mobile device lifecycle phase in Intune with its correct action. Each item may be used once, more than once, or not at all. Register devices with the MDM system. The correct match is enroll. Apply security baselines and configure Wi-Fi. The correct match is configure. Monitor policy compliance and deploy updates. The correct match is protect. Perform a selective wipe to remove corporate data. The correct match is retire. Now let me explain these matches so you understand how each phase functions within Intune. First, registering devices with the MDM system aligns with the enroll phase because this is when devices are brought under Intune's management. Additionally, applying security baselines and configuring Wi-Fi belongs to the configure phase, since administrators set up essential policies and settings during this stage. Furthermore, monitoring compliance and deploying updates match the protect phase, as Intune continually checks device health and enforces security requirements. Finally, performing a selective wipe to remove corporate data is part of the retire phase, because this process securely removes organizational data when a device leaves service or is repurposed. Question 11. For each statement below, indicate whether the answer is true or false. Enrollment in Intune is required for accessing company email through a mobile device. The correct answer is true. Intune supports device enrollment for Android 6.0 and later. The correct answer is false. Devices joined to Microsoft Entra ID can be automatically enrolled into MDM. The correct answer is true. Device Enrollment Manager is limited to enrolling no more than 5 devices. The correct answer is false. Now let me explain these statements so the reasoning behind each answer becomes clear. First, enrollment in Intune is often required because organizations commonly enforce conditional access policies that block email access until the device is fully enrolled and compliant. Additionally, the claim about Android 6.0 is false since Intune only supports Android 8.0 and later for enrollment, making the earlier version incompatible. Furthermore, devices joined to Microsoft Entra ID can indeed be automatically enrolled into MDM because Entra ID integrates with Intune to streamline device management during the join process. Finally, the Device Enrollment Manager is not limited to 5 devices. It can enroll up to 1,000 devices, while the 5-device limit applies only to standard user accounts. Question 12. Fill in the blanks by selecting the correct options from the drop-down menus. To bulk enroll Windows devices, you need both Microsoft Entra ID P1 or P2 and the Windows Configuration Designer tool. Without premium licensing, you must fall back on manual enrollment methods instead. Now let me explain why these selections are correct, so the entire requirement becomes clear. First, Microsoft Entra ID P1 or P2 is required because bulk or automated enrollment relies on premium licensing to enable advanced provisioning workflows. Additionally, Windows Configuration Designer is necessary since it creates provisioning packages that automate enrollment and configuration during bulk setup. Finally, without these premium capabilities, organizations must use manual enrollment methods because automated provisioning options will not function without the required license tier. Question 13. An employee receives a new Windows 11 laptop and needs to join it to Microsoft Entra ID. The IT department allows users to self-enroll their devices. Which 2 methods can the user use to join the device to Microsoft Entra ID? Select 2 answers. A. By typing Entra credentials during the first run experience FRX. B. By registering the device through group policy. C. By opening the Settings app and selecting Entra ID Join. D. By using Windows PowerShell to modify the domain. E. By logging into Office 365 from a browser. The correct answers are A. By typing Entra credentials during the first run experience FRX. And C. By opening the Settings app and selecting Entra ID Join. Now I'm going to explain why these 2 options are the valid self-enrollment methods. First, during the first run experience on a new Windows 11 device, the user can enter their Entra credentials. And this process directly joins the device to Microsoft Entra ID while Windows setup completes. So option A correctly reflects a supported join path. Additionally, users can later open the Settings app, go to the Accounts area, and choose Entra ID Join to manually connect an already running device, which makes option C another proper self-service method. However, registering the device through group policy relates more to traditional Active Directory management rather than Microsoft Entra Join, so option B is not appropriate here. Furthermore, while PowerShell can handle many administrative tasks, modifying the domain with a script is not the standard or user-friendly way for end users to perform an Entra ID join, so option D is unsuitable. Finally, logging into Office 365 from a browser only grants access to cloud apps and does not register or join the laptop itself to Entra ID, which is why option E is also incorrect. Question 14. Arrange the steps to configure Apple MDM Push Certificate in Intune in the correct order. Instruction: drag and drop the items into the correct order, starting with the first step at the top. Step 1, download CSR from Intune. Step 2, navigate to Apple Certificate Portal and upload CSR. Step 3, download Apple Signed Certificate. Step 4, return to Intune and upload the certificate. Now let me explain these steps so the full Apple MDM certificate workflow is easy to follow. First, downloading the certificate signing request from Intune is necessary because this file is required to generate the Apple Push certificate. Additionally, navigating to the Apple Certificate Portal and uploading the CSR allows Apple's system to validate and prepare the certificate. Furthermore, downloading the Apple Signed Certificate comes next, because this file contains the trusted signature that enables Intune to communicate with Apple devices. Finally, returning to Intune and uploading the certificate completes the configuration, allowing Intune to successfully manage Apple devices across the organization. Question 15. For each Windows device enrollment method, drag it to its distinguishing characteristic. Each item may be used once, more than once, or not at all. Requires no user interaction during the correct match is autopilot self-deploying mode. Used to enroll devices that are already managed by Configuration Manager. The correct match is Configuration Manager Co-Management. used by IT admins to pre-enroll and hand out devices. The correct match is Device Enrollment Manager DEM. Allows users to join Microsoft Entra ID via Settings app. The correct match is Add Work or School Account. Now let me explain these matches so the differences between enrollment methods become clear. First, Autopilot self-deploying mode requires no user interaction because it is designed for scenarios like kiosks or shared devices, where the setup must run completely unattended. Additionally, Configuration Manager co-management is used when devices are already managed by ConfigManager and need to be brought into Intune without losing existing management capabilities. Furthermore, the Device Enrollment Manager method is handled by IT admins who pre-enroll devices using a DEM account before distributing them to users. Finally, Add Work or School Account is the standard user-driven join option found in the Settings app, allowing users to manually connect their devices to Microsoft Entra ID and initiate Intune enrollment. Question 16. What are 2 requirements for enrolling a personal Android device in Microsoft Intune? Select 2 answers. A. Install the Intune Company Portal app from Google Play. B. Use a managed Google Workspace account. C. Enroll using a provisioning package. D. Sign in with a work or school account. The correct answers are A. Install the Intune Company Portal app from Google Play, and D. Sign in with a work or school account. Now let me explain why these 2 are required for Android BYOD enrollment. First, installing the Intune Company Portal app is essential because the app handles the entire enrollment and compliance process for personal Android devices. Additionally, signing in with a work or school account is mandatory since users must authenticate with their Microsoft Entra identity before the device can be managed. However, using a managed Google Workspace account is not required for Intune enrollment, so option B does not apply. Finally, provisioning packages are only used for Windows devices, not Android, which is why option C is incorrect. Question 17. Your organization has moved to Microsoft Entra Join for all employee devices. You want to manage these devices without using traditional group policy. You also want to enforce security policies and manage mobile devices such as tablets. Which 2 actions should you take? Select 2 answers. A. Enable Microsoft Entra domain services and apply group policy. B. Integrate Microsoft Intune with Microsoft Entra ID. C. Assign Intune licenses to all Microsoft Entra ID users. D. Use Azure policy to manage device-level settings. E. Manually apply policies using PowerShell. The correct answers are B. Integrate Microsoft Intune with Microsoft Entra ID, and C. Assign Intune licenses to all Microsoft Entra ID users. Now I'm going to explain why these are the right choices for managing modern devices centrally. First, integrating Microsoft Intune with Microsoft Entra ID is essential because Intune becomes the cloud management platform that pushes security policies, app deployments, and compliance rules to both computers and mobile devices, giving you the centralized control that group policy used to provide. Additionally, assigning Intune licenses to all Microsoft Entra ID users is necessary since each user needs a valid Intune license before their devices can be enrolled and managed automatically. However, enabling Microsoft Entra domain services with group policy still leans on classic on-premises style management and does not fully cover mobile devices, so option A does not match the goal. Furthermore, Azure policy focuses on controlling resources in Azure, such as virtual machines or storage, not the configuration of user endpoints, which makes option D unsuitable here. Finally, manually applying policies with PowerShell would be extremely hard to scale for many users and devices, so option E is not a practical management strategy compared to Intune. Question 18. Which configuration manager feature should you use to monitor settings beyond the default client evaluation? Select 1 answer. A. Configuration Baseline Viewer. B. Compliance Settings. C. Client Health Monitor. D. Intune Policies. The correct answer is B. Compliance Settings. Now let me explain why this is the correct choice for monitoring configurations beyond standard client checks. First, compliance settings allow administrators to define and verify specific configuration requirements on managed devices, going well beyond the basic health checks performed by the client. Additionally, this feature ensures that devices adhere to organizational standards by evaluating custom rules and reporting compliance status. However, Configuration Baseline Viewer is not a native config and gear tool and serves as a distractor. Furthermore, the Client Health Monitor only checks the client's operational state, not detailed device configuration. Finally, Intune policies belong to a separate cloud management platform and do not apply to Configuration Manager's internal compliance capabilities, which is why they are not the correct answer. Question 19. Which 3 device profile types can configure security-related settings in Intune? Select 3 answers. A. Endpoint protection, B. Identity protection, C. VPN, D. Edition upgrade and mode switch, E. Device restrictions. The correct answers are A. Endpoint protection, B. Identity protection, and E. Device restrictions. Now let me explain why these 3 profile types are responsible for configuring security settings. First, Endpoint Protection manages Windows Defender, BitLocker, and other critical security configurations that protect the device from threats. Additionally, Identity Protection controls authentication features such as Windows Hello for Business, PIN, and gesture-based sign-in, all of which directly impact device security. Furthermore, Device Restrictions contributes to security by limiting or disabling features like cameras, Bluetooth, and other device capabilities that could pose security risks if misused. However, VPN profiles focus on secure network connectivity rather than device security settings, making option C incorrect. Finally, Edition Upgrade and Mode Switch deals with operating system licensing and edition changes, not security configuration, so option D is not part of the security-related profiles. Question 20. Fill in the blanks by selecting the correct options from the drop-down menus. The super mandatory profile type blocks users from signing in if the profile isn't available. Now let me explain why this is the correct selection. First, a super mandatory profile is designed to be even stricter than a normal mandatory profile because it prevents the user from signing in unless the profile loads successfully. Additionally, this ensures that all required configurations and user settings are applied before the session begins, which is critical for secure and controlled environments. Other options, such as App Data, Default Profile, or Credential Manager, do not enforce login restrictions or profile availability, which is why they are not suitable in this context. Question 21. Fill in the blank by selecting the correct option from the drop-down menu. Data synced by ESR is encrypted using Azure Rights Management. Now let me explain why this is the correct option. First, Enterprise State Roaming relies on Azure Rights Management to secure synced data both in transit and at rest, ensuring that user settings and data remain protected across devices. Additionally, other options such as OneDrive, Microsoft Edge, or Credential Manager use their own separate encryption technologies that do not apply to ESR, which is why they are not suitable answers. File Server Resource Manager also does not handle encryption for roaming profiles, and UEV uses different protection mechanisms entirely, making Azure Rights Management the only correct choice. Question 22. Your organization is preparing to deploy Microsoft Edge and Microsoft Office to all users. You need to configure a standardized set of security and feature settings for both applications using Intune in a manner similar to how group policy objects are used in on-premises environments. Which Intune configuration options should you use? Select 2 answers. A. Administrative templates. B. Device restrictions. C. Custom profiles. D. Endpoint protection. E. Kiosk. The correct answers are A. Administrative templates and C. Custom profiles. Now let me explain why these 2 options are the right choices for configuring Microsoft Edge and Office settings. First, administrative templates provide ADMX-backed configuration settings for applications like Edge and Office, allowing you to apply group policy style controls through Intune, which directly meets the requirement for standardized settings. Additionally, custom profiles allow you to create fine-tuned configurations that go beyond built-in templates, making them useful for applying additional or advanced application-specific settings. However, device restrictions focus mainly on system-level behaviors rather than application configurations, so option B is not appropriate. Furthermore, endpoint protection is designed for security baselines like Defender and BitLocker, not for app configuration, making option D unsuitable. Finally, kiosk mode is intended for locking devices into a single-use scenario and doesn't configure general application settings, so option E is incorrect. Question 23. Arrange the following steps required to create a Windows device profile in Microsoft Intune in the correct order. Instruction: drag and drop the items into the correct order, starting with the first step at the top. Step 1. Configure platform and profile type. Step 2. Define basics like name and description. Step 3. Set configuration settings. Step 4. Assign the profile to user or device groups. Step 5. Apply applicability rules. Step 6. Review and create the profile. Now let me explain why this order is correct so the whole profile creation flow is clear. First, you must configure the platform and profile type because Intune needs to know whether you are targeting Windows and what kind of profile you are building before it can show any other options. Next, you define basics like the name and description so admins and help desk staff can easily recognize what the profile is for. After that, you set configuration settings since these options control the actual behavior that will be pushed to devices. Subsequently, you assign the profile to user or device groups, so Intune knows which endpoints should receive those settings. Then, you apply applicability rules to refine the scope further, for example, limiting the profile to certain Windows editions or versions. Finally, you review and create the profile, confirming all choices before Intune saves and starts using it. Question 24. For each statement below, indicate whether the answer is true or false. You can view the compliant status of MAM policies from the App Protection Status pane in Intune. The correct answer is true. The User Status Report includes information about each user's devices, apps, and app check-in status. The correct answer is true. Protected apps are listed under Unmanaged MAM activity in the app report. The correct answer is false. The User Configuration Report displays app configuration policies received by a specific user. The correct answer is true. Now let me explain why each statement is classified this way. First, the App Protection Status pane does indeed provide multiple views that let administrators monitor compliance with MAM policies, so the first statement is true. Additionally, the User Status Report shows device, app, and check-in information for each user, confirming that the second statement is also true. However, protected apps appear under Managed MAM activity, not unmanaged, meaning the third statement is false. Finally, the User Configuration Report does display which configuration policies a user has received, making the last statement true. Question 25. For each statement below, indicate whether the answer is true or false. The App Configuration Report shows which users have received configurations for a selected app. The correct answer is true. Only enrolled devices are included in the App Configuration Report. The correct answer is false. The top configured apps without enrollment list is useful for understanding app usage on BYOD devices. The correct answer is true. The App Configuration Report can only be filtered by user, not by platform. The correct answer is false. Now let me explain why each statement is evaluated this way. First, the App Configuration Report does show which users have received configurations for a selected application, so the first statement is true. Additionally, the report includes both managed and unmanaged devices depending on the configuration scope, which means the second statement is false. Furthermore, the top configured apps without enrollment list helps reveal usage patterns and configuration trends on BYOD or unmanaged devices, making the third statement true. Finally, the App Configuration Report allows filtering by both platform and app, not just by user, so the last statement is false. Question 26. For each statement below, indicate whether the answer is true or false. Both the user and computer sections of a GPO contain a software settings node. The correct answer is true. Control Panel will not advertise published applications if a user lacks install permissions. The correct answer is true. Advanced deployment is required in order to assign software to a computer. The correct answer is false. Extension activation is only available for assigned software packages. The correct answer is false. Now let me explain why these answers are correct. First, both the user and computer sections of a group policy object include a software settings node where deployment packages can be created and configured, so the first statement is true. Additionally, group policy honors user permissions, meaning the control panel will not display published applications to users who do not have permission to install them, making the second statement true. However, assigning software to a computer can be done through basic deployment. Advanced deployment is only needed when customization is required, which is why the third statement is false. Finally, extension activation applies to published applications when a user interacts with a related file type, not only assigned packages, so the last statement is false. Question 27. Fill in the blanks by selecting the correct options from the drop-down menus. After April 30th, 2023, Microsoft Intune disconnected Microsoft Store for Business Services. By September 15th, 2023, apps from Microsoft Store for Business were removed from the Intune Admin Center. Now let me explain why these options are correct. First, on April 30th, 2023, Microsoft Intune officially disconnected integration with Microsoft Store for Business, meaning syncing and management of apps through that service stopped entirely. Additionally, by September 15th, 2023, Microsoft finalized this retirement by removing all Microsoft Store for Business apps from the Admin Center, which is why the second blank correctly uses removed. Other terms like enforced, synced, connected, or hidden do not match the official deprecation timeline, making disconnected and removed the accurate choices. Question 28. Fill in the blanks by selecting the correct options from the drop-down menus. To create a new app category in Intune, go to the App Categories page, click Add, enter a name, and select Create. Now let me explain why these are the correct selections. First, the App Categories page is the proper location within Intune for creating and managing custom app categories, so that option correctly fills the first blank. Additionally, clicking Add is the required action to start defining a new category, which makes it the right choice for the second blank. Other options, such as app monitoring, add group, assignments, or update settings, do not relate to category creation, which is why they are incorrect for this task. Question 29. Arrange the steps to view detailed MAM compliance status for a specific user in the correct order. Instruction. Drag and drop the items into the correct order, starting with the first step at the top. Step 1. Sign in to Microsoft Intune Admin Center. Step 2. Select Apps, Monitor App Protection Status. Step 3. Choose either the User Status for iOS or User Status for Android tile. Step 4. Use Select User to find a Microsoft Entra user. Step 5. Select the user and view compliance status details. Now I'm going to explain why this arrangement is correct. First, you must sign in to the Microsoft Intune Admin Center, because all MAM reporting and compliance tools are accessed from this portal. Next, selecting Apps Monitor. App Protection Status brings you into the monitoring area that contains all app protection policy reports. Then, choosing either the User Status for iOS or User Status for Android tile ensures that you view the correct platform-specific compliance data. After that, using Select User allows you to locate the specific Microsoft Entra user whose details you need to review. Finally, selecting that user displays the complete MAM compliance status information for that user. Question 30. For each Microsoft Store for Business feature, drag it to the appropriate description in the correct match column. Each item may be used once, more than once, or not at all. Prevents app installation if insufficient licenses exist. Correct match, license enforcement. Removes app licenses when a user is deleted from Entra ID. Correct match, automatic license revocation. Syncs purchased apps with Intune for assignment. Correct match, app synchronization. Marks apps with online or offline in Intune portal. Correct match, license type tagging. Now I'm going to explain why each match is correct. First, license enforcement stops app assignments when the number of available licenses is too low, which directly relates to preventing installation when licenses are insufficient. Next, automatic license revocation removes app licenses automatically whenever a user is deleted from Microsoft Entra ID, ensuring proper cleanup of assigned licenses. Additionally, app synchronization handles syncing purchased or free apps from Microsoft Store for Business into the Intune Admin Center, making them available for deployment. Finally, license type tagging marks apps as online or offline based on license type, helping administrators quickly identify how each license behaves in Intune. Question 31. Which two capabilities are benefits of using Intune app protection policies without requiring device enrollment? Select two answers. A. Company data is protected at the app level. B. App policies apply to all apps, including personal ones. C. Users can access company data only on Windows devices. D. Personal data remains untouched when using work apps. The correct answers are A. Company data is protected at the app level, and D. Personal data remains untouched when using work apps. Now, I'm going to explain why these options are correct. First, app protection policies secure organizational data at the app level, meaning company information stays protected even when the device itself is not enrolled, which makes option A correct. Additionally, personal data remains untouched because app protection policies operate only within managed work apps, ensuring user privacy, which supports option D. However, option B is incorrect because app protection policies do not apply to personal apps. They only apply to work apps. Finally, option C is incorrect because app protection policies are supported on iOS and Android, not just Windows, so this does not represent a valid benefit. Question 32. Which action can users perform from the company portal website even if their device is not enrolled in Intune? Select one answer. A. Install required apps. B. Install available apps. C. Receive automatic app updates. D. Uninstall apps. The correct answer is B. Install available apps. Now I'm going to explain why this option is correct. First, the company portal website allows users to install apps that are marked as available with or without enrollment, which means users can install these apps even when their devices are not enrolled in Intune. Meanwhile, required apps cannot be installed manually because they are pushed automatically and require device enrollment. Additionally, automatic app updates are only delivered to enrolled devices, making option C incorrect. Lastly, uninstalling apps through Intune requires device management, so option D is also not possible without enrollment. Question 33. You work for an organization that does not use Configuration Manager but still needs to control how Microsoft 365 apps are deployed, including specifying update channels and removing MSI versions of Office. You also plan to integrate this with Intune. Which tool should you choose? Select one answer. A. Office Customization Tool. B. Microsoft 365 Portal. C. End User Installation. D. Office Deployment Tool. The correct answer is D. Office Deployment Tool. Now I'm going to explain why this option is correct. The Office Deployment Tool is designed to give administrators full control over Microsoft 365 apps deployment, including configuring update channels, managing install settings, and removing older MSI versions, capabilities that align exactly with the requirements described in the question. By contrast, the Office Customization Tool only generates XML configuration files and cannot independently perform deployments or MSI removals. Meanwhile, the Microsoft 365 Portal is intended for end-user-initiated installations and does not provide the administrative controls needed here. Lastly, end-user installation offers no administrative management, making it unsuitable for controlled deployment scenarios. Question 34. You are an IT admin concerned about corporate data leakage due to users copying content from company apps into personal apps. You want to restrict this behavior without managing users' devices. What should you do? Select one answer. A. Apply BitLocker encryption to company-managed apps. B. Restrict device copy and paste permissions through device policies. C. Use Intune app protection policies to block copy-paste in managed apps. D. Enforce Microsoft Defender Smart Screen in all mobile browsers. The correct answer is C. Use Intune app protection policies to block copy-paste in managed apps. Now let's move into the explanation so the reasoning becomes clear. App protection policies in Intune control data actions within managed apps, allowing you to stop copy, paste, save as, and data transfers without requiring device enrollment. BitLocker isn't suitable because its purpose is whole disk encryption and it provides no in-app data flow controls. Device-level copy-paste restrictions only work when devices are fully enrolled, which isn't the case in a MAM-only scenario. Smart Screen focuses on web protection and phishing defense, offering no capabilities to restrict copy-paste behavior within apps. Question 35. Arrange the following steps to implement app-level protection using Intune Mobile Application Management MAM. Instruction. Drag and drop the items into the correct order, starting with the first step at the top. Step 1. Create Intune app protection policies. Step 2. Configure policy settings, e.g. PIN data sharing restrictions. Step 3. Assign policies to user groups. Step 4. Monitor policy deployment and compliance. Now moving into the explanation. The process begins by creating the app protection policies, because Intune requires a defined policy before any rules can be applied. After that, specific settings are configured to control app behavior, such as requiring a PIN or limiting data transfers. Next, the policies are assigned to user groups, so the protections apply to the correct audience. Finally, monitoring ensures the policies deploy correctly and users remain compliant with organizational requirements. Question 36. For each statement below, indicate whether the answer is true or false. Always On VPN can reconnect automatically after an internet outage. True, direct access is still recommended for use with Windows 11 devices. False. Remote access role includes services like routing and web application proxy. True. SSTP is supported for configuration using mobile device management MDM. False. Now let's move into the explanation. Always On VPN is marked true because it is designed to automatically re-establish VPN connectivity once the internet returns, ensuring users stay connected without manual action. Next, direct access is false since it is a legacy technology and not supported on Windows 11. Organizations now rely on Always On VPN instead. Furthermore, the remote access role statement is true, as this role indeed includes features such as routing and the web application proxy in Windows Server. Finally, the SSTP statement is false because SSTP cannot be configured through MDM. It only becomes available when using the automatic VPN protocol option. This completes the explanation for question 36. Question 37. Fill in the blanks by selecting the correct options from the drop-down menus. Deploying Always On VPN requires a perimeter network with 2 firewalls to secure traffic and a physical or virtual server with 2 network adapters for RAS gateway deployment. Now I'm going to explain how each answer fits. A perimeter network is correct because Always On VPN must isolate external connections from internal resources, creating a secure boundary between the internet and the internal network. Next, 2 firewalls are needed since one handles inbound traffic from the internet, while the second separates and protects the internal network, offering layered security. Additionally, the solution requires 2 network adapters because the RAS gateway must maintain separate interfaces for external routing and internal routing, ensuring proper segmentation and traffic flow. This wraps up the explanation for question 37. Question 38. Your company wants to ensure tighter control over iOS devices. The compliance team decides to enable enhanced jailbreak detection. What must be true for this setting to function correctly? Select 2 answers. A. Location services must be enabled at the OS level. B. The device must check in at least once every 24 hours. C. The user must manually open the Intune Company Portal app every day. The Company Portal app must be allowed to use location services. The correct answers are A. Location services must be enabled at the OS level, and D. The Company Portal app must be allowed to use location services. Let's unpack why these two are required. Enhanced jailbreak detection relies on the device's location APIs, so location services have to be turned on at the operating system level. Otherwise, the feature has no data to evaluate and cannot reliably detect risky behavior. Moreover, the Intune Company Portal app needs explicit permission to use location services because it is the app that actually reports the device's status back to Intune, so blocking its access would effectively disable the enhanced detection capability. By contrast, the device does not need to check in every 24 hours because the standard interval is longer, around 72 hours, so that condition is not mandatory for this feature. Similarly, users are not required to open the Company Portal app every single day, since compliance checks can occur automatically in the background without daily manual interaction. Question 39. For each statement below, indicate whether the answer is true or false. The Intune Data Warehouse data refreshes multiple times a day. False. The Intune Data Warehouse includes more historical data than the Admin Center. True. Microsoft Graph enables relationship navigation across Intune objects. True. Microsoft Graph API cannot be used for standalone MDM deployments. False. Now let's walk through the explanations. To begin with, the Intune Data Warehouse does not update several times per day. Instead, it refreshes only once daily. This slower refresh cycle is designed to support large-scale historical reporting rather than real-time monitoring. Meanwhile, the claim about historical data is correct because the data warehouse stores extended reporting information that goes far beyond what is visible in the Admin Center, making it more suitable for analytics. Furthermore, Microsoft Graph does allow relationship navigation across Intune objects, meaning you can query connected resources like devices, users, and configurations in a linked manner. Finally, the idea that Graph cannot be used for standalone MDM is incorrect because Microsoft Graph fully supports Intune's standalone MDM scenarios, allowing developers and administrators to automate and integrate without relying on additional systems. Question 40. Where do you go in the Microsoft Intune Admin Center to create a device compliance policy? Select one answer. A. Endpoint Manager Devices Device Enrollment. B. Microsoft Entra ID Policies Conditional Access. C. Devices Compliance Policies Policies. D. Devices Configuration Profiles Create. The correct answer is C. Devices Compliance Policies Policies. Now I'll walk you through the explanation. First, the correct path is Devices Compliance Policies, Policies, because this is the dedicated section for creating and managing all compliance policies in Intune. It's where administrators define rules such as OS versions, password requirements, and security configurations that devices must meet. Conversely, Endpoint Manager Devices Device Enrollment is used strictly for enrollment settings, so it doesn't handle compliance. Additionally, Microsoft Entra ID Policies Conditional Access focuses on access control decisions, not device compliance creation. Lastly, Devices Configuration Profiles Create is intended for configuration profiles which manage device settings rather than compliance criteria. Question 41. For each Microsoft Entra ID protection concept, drag it to the appropriate box in the correct match column to match it against its description. Each item may be used once, more than once, or not at all. Calculates risk based on location, app, and device used. Correct match, risk calculation engine, can require MFA or password change based on sign-in risk level. Correct match, risk policy enforcement. Enables monitoring of flagged users and risk events through a dashboard. Correct match, monitoring dashboard, detects authentication attempts from new or distant geographic locations. Correct match, risk calculation engine, provides automatic or manual response options based on risk policy. Correct match, risk policy enforcement. I am now going to explain these answers. To start, the risk calculation engine determines sign-in risk by analyzing signals such as location, device, and application, which is why it correctly fits the first statement. It also detects unusual authentication attempts, like sign-ins from far apart geographic locations, making it the right match for the fourth statement as well. Meanwhile, Risk policy enforcement takes the calculated risk level and applies the appropriate action, such as requiring MFA or forcing a password reset, which aligns with the second statement. In addition, because it can trigger automatic or manual responses depending on policy configuration, it also fits the final statement. Lastly, the monitoring dashboard provides real-time insight into flagged users and risk events, enabling admins to track vulnerabilities and activity, which is why it matches the third statement. Question 42. Arrange the following steps to generate a report of all devices in the Microsoft Intune Admin Center. Instruction: drag and drop the items into the correct order, starting with the first step at the top. Select Devices, then All Devices. Select Columns and apply desired fields. Select Filter and apply criteria such as OS or ownership. Select Export. Confirm by selecting Yes to download the report. I'm now going to walk you through why these steps follow this sequence. First, you must begin by navigating to the Devices section and choosing All Devices, because this sets the scope of the report you're about to generate. Next, selecting Columns allows you to define exactly which data fields you want included in the final report, ensuring the output fits your reporting needs. After that, applying filters helps refine the dataset even further, letting you narrow down results by factors like operating system or device ownership, which makes the report more meaningful. Once your view is configured, choosing Export initiates the process of generating the downloadable file. Finally, Intune requires a confirmation step, so selecting Yes finalizes the export and delivers the report as a .csv download. Question 43. Which two standards must your reporting client support to use the Intune Data Warehouse OData feed? Select two answers. A. OData v4.0, B. OAuth 2.0, C. HTTP Basic Authentication, D. JSON Schema 3.0. The correct answers are A. OData v4.0 and B. OAuth 2.0. Now let's walk through why these two are required. To start, OData v4.0 is the protocol version used by the Intune Data Warehouse to expose reporting data, so any reporting client must support it to read the dataset properly. Likewise, OAuth 2.0 is essential because Microsoft Cloud Services rely on it for secure authentication, ensuring the reporting client can obtain access token before retrieving data. Meanwhile, HTTP Basic Authentication is not supported in this context, since it's neither secure nor compatible with Microsoft Cloud APIs. Additionally, JSON Schema 3.0 has no role in OData consumption or Power BI connections, so it does not apply here. That's why OData v4.0 and OAuth 2.0 are the only valid requirements for accessing the Intune Data Warehouse OData feed. Question 44. Fill in the blanks by selecting the correct options from the drop-down menus. WIP relies on trusted apps to enforce policies, while EFS uses user certificates to encrypt files on a per-user basis. Now I'm going to explain why these choices are correct. First, Windows Information Protection depends on trusted apps, because WIP must be able to identify which applications are allowed to access or interact with protected corporate data. By limiting access to trusted apps, WIP ensures that policies are enforced only through approved software. Furthermore, EFS functions through user certificates because encrypting file system relies on per-user public and private key pairs. This design ensures that each encrypted file can only be decrypted by the specific user who owns the certificate, providing individualized data protection. Meanwhile, TPM chips relate to BitLocker rather than EFS. Encryption modes are WIP configuration options, not EFS mechanisms. And network boundaries apply to WIP resource control, not file-level encryption. That is why trusted apps and user certificates correctly complete the statement. Question 45. Fill in the blanks by selecting the correct options from the drop-down menus. If EFS encrypted files are transferred via SMB, they are decrypted during transfer, but if saved using WebDAV, they remain encrypted. I'm now going to walk through why this is correct. To begin, SMB does not preserve EFS encryption during transit. When an EFS-protected file moves across an SMB network share, the The file is transmitted in plain text because SMB handles the file contents directly, rather than maintaining the EFS encryption envelope. This means the file is effectively decrypted during transfer. However, WebDAV operates differently. WebDAV communicates through HTTP-based methods that preserve the file's original encrypted state. As a result, an EFS encrypted file saved through WebDAV remains encrypted throughout the process, maintaining its protection end-to-end. Meanwhile, the other options do not align with EFS behavior. Re-encrypted does not occur automatically. TPM is unrelated to file copying, and EFS files are never deleted simply because they are transferred. That is why the correct selections are decrypted during transfer and remain encrypted. Question 46. Which two actions can an administrator take if controlled folder access blocks a legitimate application? Select two answers. A. Disable Defender antivirus entirely. B. Use group policy to allow specific applications. C. Edit the registry for Defender bypass. D. Use Intune to add an allowed application override. The correct answers are B and D. Now let's walk through the explanation. Controlled folder access is designed to protect critical folders from unauthorized changes. So the goal is to allow the legitimate app without weakening security. Using group policy is one supported method because it lets administrators configure allowed applications through the controlled folder access settings, ensuring the app can function while the protection remains active. Additionally, Intune can be used to push an allowed application override. This is especially useful in modern cloud-managed environments, as Intune integrates with Defender settings and allows administrators to safely authorize applications across devices. Conversely, disabling Defender antivirus entirely would expose the system to unnecessary risk and does not address the root issue. Editing the registry to bypass Defender is also unsafe, unsupported, and not recommended for any production scenario. That is why the correct options are use group policy to allow specific applications and use Intune to add an allowed application override. Question 47. For each statement below, indicate whether it is true or false. Microsoft Defender for Endpoint provides visibility into Microsoft Defender settings on local clients. True. Only domain-joined devices are supported by Microsoft Defender Application Guard. False. System Guard helps validate platform integrity during and after boot. True. Group policy is the only method to configure exploit guard features. False. Now I'm going to explain each of these statements so they make sense. First, Defender for Endpoint is marked true because it can monitor and report on Defender antivirus settings across client machines, allowing security teams to verify that protection is consistent and correctly configured. Secondly, the statement about Application Guard is false since it also supports certain BYOD and personal devices when they are managed through Intune, so it is not restricted only to domain-joined machines. Furthermore, System Guard is true because it performs integrity checks at boot time and continues to validate the platform during runtime, helping ensure the operating system has not been tampered with. Lastly, the claim that group policy is the only way to configure exploit guard is false, because these protections can also be managed through Intune, giving organizations both on-premises and cloud-based management options. Question 48. For each statement below, indicate whether the answer is true or false. Windows Defender Firewall can apply different rule sets based on whether a computer is on a domain, private, or public network. True. Inbound rules define how a computer handles outbound traffic. False. Connection security rules alone are sufficient to allow traffic between computers. False. Program rules in the firewall define access based on executable file paths. True. Now let's move into the explanation so you can see why each answer is correct. To begin, the first statement is true because Windows Defender Firewall uses network location profiles such as domain, private, and public, and each profile can have its own set of rules applied depending on where the device is connected. Meanwhile, the inbound rules statement is false since inbound rules control incoming traffic only and have nothing to do with outbound behavior, which is governed by outbound rules. Additionally, connection security rules alone don't allow traffic by themselves, so that statement is false. These rules enforce authentication or encryption between endpoints, but separate firewall rules are still needed to permit the actual traffic. Finally, the statement about program rules is true because firewall program rules match access permissions to a program's executable path, allowing or denying traffic for that specific application. Question 49. An administrator needs to ensure that corporate data cannot be copied or transferred to personal cloud services such as Facebook or a user's personal OneDrive account while still allowing legitimate work applications to operate normally. Which solution should be implemented? Select one answer. A. Enable BitLocker with TPM. B. Use WIP with block or hide overrides mode. C. Enable EFS on each user's folder. D. Use Azure Rights Management with automatic classification. Correct answer is B. Now that we've identified the answer, let's walk through why it's correct. WIP with block or hide overrides mode is the right choice because it stops users from sharing protected corporate data with unauthorized apps or services, while still letting approved work apps function normally. This mode prevents data leakage to places like Facebook or personal OneDrive by enforcing app-level restrictions. On the other hand, BitLocker with TPM only encrypts the disk and doesn't control app-based data sharing, which means users could still upload files to personal cloud services. Similarly, EFS encrypts individual files but has no mechanism for blocking data movement into unapproved apps or locations. Azure Rights Management focuses on protecting content, but it doesn't stop users from opening or sharing that content through unauthorized apps. So the correct answer remains B. Question 50. For each security feature, drag it to the appropriate boxes in the correct match column to match it against its description in the option column. Each item may be used once, more than once, or not at all. Enforces a trust model where apps must prove trustworthiness before execution. Correct match, Windows Defender Application Control, WDAC. Blocks the execution of unsigned code, scripts, and PowerShell unless explicitly permitted. Correct match, WDAC Policy Enforcement. Uses Hyper-V to protect kernel mode processes from injection or execution of unverified code. Correct match, Windows Defender Device Guard, formerly known as Configurable Code Integrity Policies. Correct match, DAC Legacy Name, best suited for POS devices and virtual desktop infrastructure where code rarely changes. Correct match, Specialized Device Targeting. Now I'm going to explain how these pairings fit together. WDAC replaces the default trust approach with a whitelist model, meaning only trusted and approved applications can run, which is why it aligns with the first statement. Similarly, WDAC Policy Enforcement blocks unsigned binaries, MSI packages, scripts, and PowerShell unless explicitly allowed, making it the correct match for the second description. Moving forward, Windows Defender Device Guard incorporates virtualization-based security using Hyper-V to isolate kernel mode processes, preventing unverified code from injecting itself, which fits the third statement. The fourth item refers to WDAC's earlier name, Configurable Code Integrity Policies, so WDAC Legacy Name is the correct match. Lastly, Specialized Device Targeting applies to stable environments such as POS terminals and VDI sessions, where applications rarely change, making strict code integrity enforcement more practical and effective, which is why it matches the final option. Question 51. What is the primary benefit of Microsoft Defender for cloud apps being integrated into Microsoft Defender XDR? Select one answer. A. It replaces all other Defender security products. B. It reduces your Microsoft 365 license requirements. C. It limits support to Microsoft Cloud apps only. D. It centralizes security management across Microsoft services. The correct answer is D. It centralizes security management across Microsoft services. Now let's move into the explanation. This integration brings together visibility across identities, devices, cloud apps, data, and infrastructure into a single unified XDR experience, which greatly improves threat detection and response. Option A is incorrect because the integration does not replace any Defender products. Instead, it enhances how they work together. Option B is also incorrect since licensing remains unchanged. And option C is wrong because Defender for Cloud Apps supports many third-party SaaS applications, not just Microsoft ones. Question 52. Which browser and app sources does Microsoft Defender Smart Screen protect against? Select one answer. A. Only Microsoft Edge. B. Only Microsoft Store. C. Only Internet Explorer. D. Microsoft Edge and Microsoft Store apps. The correct answer is D. Microsoft Edge and Microsoft Store apps. Now let's move into the explanation. Smart Screen provides protection by checking unrecognized files, apps, and websites originating from both Microsoft Edge and Microsoft Store apps, which is why option D is accurate. Option A is incorrect because Smart Screen's coverage extends beyond Edge alone. Option B is wrong since it also protects Edge-based downloads, not just Store apps. And option C is incorrect because Internet Explorer is deprecated and no longer the primary browser. Smart Screen is designed to protect. Question 53. Your organization wants to protect sensitive corporate files on employee-owned BYOD Windows laptops. The solution must clearly separate business and personal data so that users can continue to access and keep their personal documents even if they leave the company and corporate access is revoked. Which solution best meets these requirements? Select one answer. A. Microsoft BitLocker. B. Azure Rights Management. C. Windows Information Protection. D. Encrypting File System EFS. The correct answer is C. Windows Information Protection. Now let's move into the explanation. Windows Information Protection is designed to distinguish corporate data from personal data on the same device, which allows the organization to selectively wipe only business information while leaving the user's personal files untouched. BitLocker encrypts the entire drive so it cannot separate personal and corporate content. Azure Rights Management protects files through encryption, but does not manage data separation on BYOD devices. EFS encrypts files individually, but cannot perform selective wipe or identify which files belong to the company. Question 54. For each statement below, indicate whether the answer is true or false. Sysprep is used to generalize a Windows image before deployment. True. Using the default Windows image allows you to skip application installation after deployment. False. Thick images can become stale due to application and configuration updates. True. Thin images require the OS to be rebuilt frequently as apps and settings change. False. Now let's move into the explanation. Sysmark true because it removes system-specific information such as the CD and prepares the Windows image so it can be safely deployed to multiple devices. The statement about using the default Windows image is false, since the default image contains no custom applications or settings, meaning apps still need to be installed after deployment. Thick images are true because they bundle apps and configurations, and as those components change over time, the entire image becomes outdated and must be refreshed. Finally, the statement about thin images is false, because thin images remain current longer. Applications and settings are applied dynamically after deployment, reducing the need to rebuild the base OS image. Question 55. For each statement below, indicate whether the answer is true or false. Configuration Manager task sequences can include application deployments and custom scripts. True. The All Users and User Groups collection can be modified to include only specific groups. False. CMTrace is recommended for interpreting Configuration Manager log files. True. Setup Diag helps identify issues during the application deployment phase. False. Now let's move into the explanation. The first statement is true because Configuration Manager task sequences are flexible and can run applications, packages, PowerShell scripts, and various automation steps during deployment. The next statement is false since built-in collections like all users and user groups are fixed and cannot be edited to include only selected groups. CmTrace is marked true because it is the preferred tool for reading and analyzing Configuration Manager log files, offering real-time log viewing with highlighting. Lastly, the setupdiag statement is false because setupdiag is used specifically for analyzing Windows upgrade and OS deployment issues, not application deployment troubleshooting. Question 56. Fill in the blanks by selecting the correct options from the drop-down menus. The Deployment Workbench is the main console for managing MDT deployments. It includes nodes for operating systems, applications, drivers, packages, and task sequences. Each task sequence uses a template to define a series of actions that occur during deployment. Now let's move into the explanation. Deployment Workbench is correct because it is the central management console used in MDT to organize every part of the deployment process. Operating Systems is the node where administrators import Windows installation sources or captured images. Applications is used for adding software packages such as MSIs or EXEs that will be installed during deployment. Drivers is where hardware-specific drivers are organized and injected as needed. Packages holds updates, language packs, and other add-on components. Task sequences is the area where the full deployment workflow is created. Additionally, each task sequence is based on a template, which provides the initial structure for how the deployment will run. The individual steps inside that sequence are called actions, representing tasks like applying the OS, configuring the disk, installing applications, or running scripts. This completes the explanation for question 56. Question 57. For each MDT component or tool, drag it to the appropriate box in the correct match column to match it with its description. Each item may be used once, more than once, or not at all. Enables unattended app installations via .exe, MSI, or scripts. Correct match applications. Delivers bootable Windows PE images to start deployment. Correct match boot images. Manages ordered steps such as OS application, partitioning, and driver injection. Correct match task sequences. Adds drivers structured by make model to avoid conflicts. Correct match drivers. Integrates with ADDS to join devices to the domain during deployment. Correct match Active Directory domain services. Now let's move into the explanation. To begin with, Applications is the right match because MDT supports nearly all scriptable installers, allowing software to be deployed silently during the imaging process. In addition, boot images is accurate since Windows PE is required to start the deployment and reach the MDT share. Meanwhile, Task Sequences aligns with the third description because it manages the full deployment workflow step by step, including OS application, disk partitioning, and driver injection. Furthermore, drivers is a match for the fourth statement because MDT organizes drivers by make and model, preventing hardware conflicts during deployment. Finally, Active Directory Domain Services corresponds to the last option since MDT can automatically join devices to a specific domain and organizational unit during the deployment phase. Question 58. Arrange the steps involved in capturing and deploying a Windows image using MDT in the correct order. Instruction. Drag and drop the items into the correct order, starting with the first step at the top. Step 1. Import operating system and applications into the deployment share. Step 2. Add drivers and packages if needed. Step 3. Create a task sequence. Step 4. Boot into Windows PE using boot image. Step 5. Deploy the image to target device using task sequence. Let's take a moment to break down why this order is correct. Initially, MDT requires you to import the operating system and applications, so the deployment share contains all necessary installation sources. Following that, drivers and packages are added to support hardware variations and ensure the deployment has everything it needs. Once those components are available, a task sequence is created to orchestrate the steps of the deployment from start to finish. After this preparation, the machine is booted into Windows PE using the MDT boot image, allowing it to connect to the deployment share. Finally, the task sequence executes to install the OS, applications, drivers, and configurations onto the target device. Question 59. Which two configuration options can Intune apply to apps after deployment? Select two answers. A. Apply a VPN gateway setting to force app-based tunneling. B. Specify a server address for an iOS app using app configuration policy. C. Configure website access restrictions using managed browser settings. D. Restrict app installation from the Apple App Store. The correct answers are B. Specify a server address for an iOS app using app configuration policy. And C. Configure website access restrictions using managed browser settings. Now let's look at why these two options are the right choices. To start, Intune app configuration policies can deliver application-specific settings such as server URLs, authentication endpoints, and feature toggles directly to supported iOS and Android apps, which is why option B is correct. In addition, Intune's managed browser settings allow administrators to define allowed or blocked websites, giving precise control over web access inside managed apps, so option C also fits the requirement. By contrast, option A is not correct because app-based VPN tunneling is configured through VPN profiles, not through post-deployment app configuration policies. And finally, restricting App Store installations falls under Apple Business Manager and device restriction policies, not Intune app configuration, making option D incorrect. Question 60. Which two deployment options offer administrators extensive control over how Microsoft 365 apps are installed and configured? Select two answers. A. End-user installation. B. Office deployment tool. C. Office customization tool. D. Microsoft 365 portal. E. Configuration manager. The correct answers are B. Office deployment tool and E. Configuration manager. Now let's walk through the explanation. To begin, the Office Deployment Tool provides administrators with deep control over Microsoft 365 apps, including update channels, installation behavior, language packs, and even removing legacy MSI versions. Additionally, Configuration Manager offers enterprise-grade deployment orchestration, enabling administrators to push apps, manage updates, and automate configurations at scale. In contrast, end-user installation leaves control in the hands of the user, so it does not meet administrative requirements. Meanwhile, the Office Customization tool only generates configuration files and must be paired with the Office Deployment tool, so on its own, it does not provide full deployment control. Lastly, the Microsoft 365 portal is designed for self-service installations and lacks centralized granular controls. Thus, the correct answers remain Office Deployment Tool and Configuration Manager,